Inciting incident. The Galactic Council emergency session had an air of barely contained glee. Representatives from a dozen star-spanning alien civilizations filled the grand amphitheater, their excitement palpable. High Counselor Xyloth, his purple scales gleaming under the chamber's lights, raised a clawed hand for silence. "The human threat is ended," Xyloth announced, his voice a resonant hiss. "General Thaddeus Vance is dead." The chamber erupted in raucous cheers. Tentacles waved, mandibles clicked, and translator implants buzzed with 100 exclamations of victory and relief. Xyloth allowed himself a sharp-toothed grin. The human's greatest military mind, the only tactician who could make the mighty Zorgax Empire tremble, had been slain. Our shadow operative infiltrated the human's flagship and eliminated Vance. Xyloth continued as the noise died down. The humans are even now still trying to determine the cause of death. Their primitive medical science will find only natural causes. What of reprisals? Burbled the gelatinous cork delegate, undulating anxiously. The humans strike hardest when wounded. They'll be headless, scoffed Warlord Craxus of the Zorgax, his beetle-black carapace crisscrossed with scars. I fought the hairless apes. They're nothing without Vance's stratagems. Vance was the head of the snake. Now he's gone, the body will thrash aimlessly. As the council members began arguing over the looming division of the human sphere of influence, the Zorgax entourage returned to their ornate embassy ship. Craxus and his top advisors convened in the onyx-walled war room, an array of holodisplays showing the positions of Zorgax and human forces. "Prepare the war fleet," Craxus ordered, his compound eyes glittering with malice. "It's time we finish what Vance started. Humanity's end begins now." Deep in the Oort cloud of the Sol system, a battered, unmarked freighter floated amid the icy debris. Its hull was pitted with micrometeoroid scars and stained with radiation burns from a dozen close transits of fiery suns. The ship was scorned by the menagerie of aliens that made up its crew, the lowest of the low, a ship for smugglers and mercenaries too disreputable for any legitimate trade. In the freighter's cramped hold, a tall, scarred man with steel-gray hair and piercing blue eyes sat before a jury-rigged comm unit. General Thaddeus Vance, hero of the Cygnus campaign, victor of the Hellspawn siege, scourge of a dozen alien warlords, leaned back in his chair and smiled as he reviewed the latest Galactic Council security reports. They took the bait. "Craxus is on the move," Vance said with grim satisfaction. "Signal Colonel Reyes. Tell her, it's time to spring the trap." Vance's fingers danced over the comm unit, entering a complex series of codes. One by one, status indicators flashed from red to green as ship captains and fleet commanders across the stars acknowledged the orders. The pieces were in motion. The game was afoot, and the galaxy would tremble with what was to come. In her quarters on the UADS at Athena, Colonel Ilara Rice took a steadying breath as Vance's terse message scrolled across her holo display. The words were simple, but their implications staggered her. This was it. The plan they'd spent years crafting, the sacrifices they'd made, the secrecy they'd endured, it all led to this moment. Rice squared her shoulders, her dark eyes hardening with resolve. She'd sworn an oath to defend humanity against all threats, to spend her life and her honor in service of Earth and its colonies. Now that oath would be tested as never before. "Summon the senior officers," Rice ordered, her voice crisp and calm. "We have our orders. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you poke a sleeping dragon." As alarms blared and booted feet thundered through the Athena steel corridors, Rice allowed herself a fierce grin. The Zorgax thought Vance's death would break humanity's spirit. Confusion and chaos gripped the Galactic Council. Reports poured in from a dozen systems, each more alarming than the last. Human fleets were on the move, striking with swift, targeted fury. Key outposts fell, supply lines were severed, and the first Zorgax warships were already drifting as burnt-out hulks. "This is impossible." Warlord Craxus slammed a clawed fist onto the war room's holo display, shattering the projected planets into flickering shards. Vance is dead. The humans should be scattered and vulnerable, not mounting coordinated attacks. The Zorgak's advisors clustered around the display, their mandibles clicking nervously. The holo image reassembled, painting a grim picture. Human ships were appearing with alarming speed and precision, almost as if they'd known exactly where to position themselves for maximum impact. On the bridge of the UNS Athena, Colonel Ilara Rice watched the tactical overlay with a hawkish intensity. Her crew moved with drilled efficiency, relaying orders and status updates in clipped tones. The tension was palpable, but so was the determination. They all knew what was at stake. "Colonel, the Zorgak 7th Fleet has altered course," reported Lieutenant Singh, his dark eyes locked on his console. "They're moving to reinforce the Kragak system." Reyes allowed herself a tiny predatory smile. "Right on schedule. Signal the 5th Battle Group to prepare for Phase 2. As the orders were relayed, Reyes thought back to the long, clandestine meetings with General Vance, the two of them poring over star charts and intelligence reports, debating strategies and contingencies deep into the night. Vance had been adamant. The key to victory wasn't brute force, but misdirection. Let the enemy think they've won, then strike when their guard is down. "The Zorgaks are prideful," Vance had said, his blue eyes gleaming in the dim light of the war room. "They'll assume my death will leave humanity in disarray. That arrogance will be their downfall." And so they'd planned, plotted, and prepared. Vance had laid the groundwork, positioning ships and personnel like pieces on a chessboard. Reyes had been his queen, ready to lead the charge when the time was right. Now, as human ships struck with precision and purpose, Reyes could almost feel Vance's presence beside her. His vision, his indomitable will, guiding their every move. In the Galactic Council chamber, High Counselor Xyloff struggled to maintain order. The assembled delegates were in an uproar, fear and recrimination filling the air. "We were assured the humans would be neutralized." The Quark delegate burbled, its gelatinous form quivering with agitation. "Yet they strike with a coordination that should be impossible without Vance." Xyloff turned to the Zorgak's ambassador, his purple scales flushed with anger. "Explain this, Craxus. Your assassin claimed Vance was eliminated." The scared warlord faced the accusing stares with a defiant snarl. "Vance is dead. I stake my honor on it. This is some human trickery, a final gambit of a doomed race." But even as the words left his mandibles, a sinking realization gripped Craxus. The humans' actions were too precise, too calculated. This was no desperate flailing of a leaderless foe, but a meticulously planned operation. And if that were true, then Vance's death had been part of the plan all along. In the cold depths of the Oort cloud, General Thaddeus Vance watched the unfolding chaos with a grim satisfaction. The board was set, the pieces in motion. The Zorgaks had wanted a war. Now they would learn the price of underestimating humanity. Vance reached for the comm unit, his scared fingers flashing over the keys. It was time for the next phase. Time to turn the screws and watch the galaxy's old order crumble. For on this day, the true power of human resolve would be unleashed, and the universe would never be the same. The Zorgak 7th Fleet emerged from hyperspace in the Kragak system, the massive warships bristling with weaponry and armor. Warlord Craxus stood on the bridge of his flagship, the inexorable, his compound eyes fixed on the view screen. The system before him was eerily quiet, the expected human resistance nowhere to be seen. "Where are they?" Craxus hissed, his claws tapping impatiently on the command console. "Scan the system. Find those hairless apes." The bridge crew scrambled to obey, their mandibles clicking with nervousness. They knew the price of failure under Craxus's command. But as the sensors swept the system, a chilling realization dawned. The human ships weren't hiding. They were already in position, their trap laid with meticulous care. A cold voice crackled over the fleet's comm channels, smooth and implacable. "Warlord Craxus, this is Colonel Ilara Rise of the United Earth Fleet. Surrender now, and your lives will be spared." Craxus snarled in fury, his carapace flushing with rage. "Surrender. To humans. Never. All ships, attack." But as the Zorgak's warships surged forward, the trap was sprung. Hidden human ships, powered down and drifting among the system's asteroids, flared to life. Minefields, seeded weeks ago by covert human operatives, activated with devastating effect. The Zorgak ships found themselves ensnared, their formation broken, their firepower divided. From the bridge of the UNS Athena, Colonel Rice watched the Zorgak's fleet's plight with cold satisfaction. Vance had predicted Craxus's every move, every reaction. The warlord's pride and aggression had been his undoing. "Signal the fleet," Rice ordered, her voice calm and measured. Commence Phase 3. Across the system, human ships moved with practiced precision. Boarding pods launched, streaking towards the crippled Zorgak's vessels. Marines in exo-armor stormed the enemy decks, their weapons spitting fire. On the planet below, human special forces teams struck at key installations, securing vital intelligence and cutting off Zorgak's reinforcements. In the heart of the inexorable, Warlord Craxus bellowed with rage as the reports flooded in. His ships were falling, his troops overwhelmed. The human attack was relentless, unstoppable. "This is impossible," Craxus roared, his claws gouging deep furrows into his command console. "No human could have planned this. Vance is dead." And then, with a sudden, sickening clarity, the truth hit him. Vance's death, the assassination that was supposed to be the Zorgak's greatest triumph. It had all been part of the humans' plan. A ruse, to lure the Zorgaks into complacency, to make them believe they'd won. Craxus had played right into Vance's hands, and now his fleet was paying the price. In the Oort cloud, General Vance monitored the unfolding battle with a hawk's intensity. His eyes tracked the flow of data, the shifting tide of combat. The Zorgaks were reeling, their command structure crumbling. But Vance knew the fight was far from over. Craxus was a cunning foe, and the Zorgaks were nothing if not tenacious. "Status report, Colonel Rice." Vance barked into the comm, his voice rough with tension. "The Zorgak's fleet is in disarray," Rice responded, her words clipped and precise. "But Craxus' flagship is still operational. He's rallying his forces for a counterattack." Vance nodded grimly, his jaw tightening. "Then it's time for the next phase. Prepare the spear." There was a momentary pause, heavy with understanding. "Yes, sir. The spear will be ready." As the comm channel closed, Vance leaned back in his chair, his eyes hard and calculating. The Zorgaks had tried to cut off the head of the snake. Now they would learn that the snake had fangs of its own. In the cold darkness of space, the Zorgak's fleet struggled to regroup. Warlord Craxus stood on the bridge of the inexorable, his claws clenched in silent fury as he surveyed the devastation. The human trap had been sprung with ruthless efficiency, leaving his once mighty armada in shambles. "Warlord, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council," one of the bridge crew reported, his voice quavering with barely suppressed fear. "High Counselor Xyloth is demanding an update on our progress." Craxus snarled, his mandibles twitching with rage. To be humiliated by the humans was bad enough, but to have to admit defeat to that preening, scheming lizard Xyloth, it was almost more than he could bear. "Ignore it," Craxus hissed, his compound eyes glittering with malice. "We will not crawl to that pompous reptile for help. The Zorgaks will crush these hairless apes on our own terms." But even as the words left his mouth, Craxus knew the tide had turned. The humans' attacks had been too precise, too calculated. They had torn through the Zorgaks' defenses like a plasma scythe through flesh, leaving only ruin in their wake. Across the galaxy, the story was the same. Human fleets struck with devastating coordination, crippling key Zorgaks installations and cutting off vital supply lines. Zorgaks reinforcements warped in, only to find themselves ensnared in meticulously laid traps and minefields. On the UNS Athena, Colonel Ilara Rice led the charge with a fierce determination. Her dark eyes blazed with the fire of a woman who had spent her life preparing for this moment, honing her skills and her resolve to a razor's edge. "Push forward," Rise commanded, her voice ringing through the Athena's bridge. "We have them on the run. Don't give them a moment to regroup." The human ships surged ahead, their weapons blazing, their crews filled with a grim, unyielding purpose. They had suffered under the Zorgax's cruelty for too long, endured too much. Now, with Vance's plan unfolding around them, they finally had a chance to strike back, to make the galaxy tremble at humanity's resolve. In the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, chaos reigned. Delegates shouted and bargained, each scrambling to secure their own interests in the face of the human onslaught. High Counselor Xyloth watched the proceedings with narrowed eyes, his purple scales flushed with a mixture of anger and calculation. "The humans have grown too bold," Xyloth hissed, his claws tapping a staccato rhythm on his ornate chair. "They think the galaxy is theirs for the taking." "Perhaps," murmured the Quark delegate, its gelatinous form pulsing with thought. "Perhaps it is time to seek a new balance. The Zorgax have failed to contain the human threat. We may need to consider other options." Xyloth's eyes flashed with sudden interest. The Quark were known for their cunning, their ability to adapt to changing circumstances. If they were suggesting a shift in allegiances, in the depths of the Oort cloud, General Thaddeus Vance monitored the shifting tides of battle with a calm, unwavering focus. The Zorgax were crumbling, their once feared military might shattering under the relentless human assault. But Vance knew the greatest challenge was yet to come. The Zorgax were a proud species, and Craxus was as cunning as he was ruthless. They would not go quietly into the night. "The endgame approaches," Vance murmured, his scurred fingers hovering over the comm controls. "It's time to see just how far Craxus is willing to go." With a flicker of movement, Vance opened a channel to the Athena. "Colonel Reyes, prepare the spear. It's time to end this." There was a moment of heavy silence, the weight of history hanging in the balance. Then, with a crackle of static, Reyes's voice filled the comm. "Understood, General. The spear is ready, awaiting your command." Vance leaned back in his chair, his blue eyes hard and calculating. The pieces were in motion. The trap was set. The Zorgax homeworld hung in space, a looming sphere of mottled green and brown. From the bridge of the UNS Athena, Colonel Ilara Reyes gazed at the planet with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. This was it, the final move in Vance's grand plan, the culmination of years of sacrifice, secrecy, and careful preparation. "All ships, report in," Reyes commanded, her voice steady and sure. One by one, the captains of the human fleet signaled their readiness, their resolve. They had come too far, lost too much, to falter now. But as the Athena and her attendant ships moved into orbital position, a sudden, chilling transmission crackled across the comm channels. "Surrender, humans." The voice was cold, rasping, filled with a malevolent triumph. "Surrender, or watch your precious Earth burn." Reyes felt a sudden, sickening lurch in her gut. That voice, it couldn't be. "Craxus," she breathed, her eyes widening in shock. But how? The view screen flickered, resolving into the scared, leering visage of the Zorgax warlord. Craxus' compound eyes glittered with cruel amusement as he took in Reyes's stunned expression. "You thought you had won, didn't you?" Craxus hissed, his mandibles twitching with glee. "Thought your precious Vance had outmaneuvered me. But Vance underestimated the depths of my cunning. Even now, a Zorgax fleet is poised to strike at Earth. Surrender, or watch your homeworld perish." Reyes felt a cold, numbing dread seep through her veins. Had it all been for nothing? All the planning, all the sacrifice? Had Vance's final gambit been just another move in Craxus's game? But even as despair threatened to overwhelm her, a sudden, crackling transmission burst across the comm. "Now, Colonel Reyes." The voice was achingly familiar, filled with a fierce, unyielding determination. "Execute endgame. Reyes's eyes widened in sudden understanding. Endgame. Vance's final contingency, the ace up his sleeve. With a burst of adrenaline, she leaped into action. All ships, execute endgame protocols. I repeat, execute endgame protocols. Kraxus's triumphant leer twisted into a snarl of confusion and rage. What is this? What trickery? But his words were cut off as a sudden, blinding flash lit up the view screen. A massive electromagnetic pulse, carefully hidden in the Zorgak's homeworld satellite network, burst to life, shorting out the planet's defenses and communications in a single, devastating stroke. At the same moment, cloaked human ships, positioned weeks ago by covered operatives, decloaked in the heart of the Zorgak system. Their holds opened, revealing not weapons, but refugees, the families and loved ones of the Zorgak's high command, evacuated and secured in secret. Your choice, Kraxus. Vance's voice rang out, cold and clear. Stand down, or risk everything you hold dear. On the view screen, Kraxus' expression twisted with rage and disbelief, his eyes darting between the helpless refugees and the looming human fleet. For a long, tense moment, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. And then, with a snarl of defeated fury, Kraxus slumped back in his command chair. Stand down, he growled, his voice thick with bitter resignation. All Zorgak's forces, stand down. In the heart of the Oort cloud, Vance closed his eyes, a wave of exhaustion and relief washing over him. It was over. The gambit had paid off. Humanity was safe, the Zorgaks broken. But even as he savored the hard-won victory, Vance knew the true challenge was just beginning. The galaxy had been shaken to its core, the old order shattered. A new balance would need to be forged, a new understanding between the stars, and he would be there to guide it, to ensure that humanity took its rightful place among the galactic community, not as conquerors, but as partners, as equals. For in the end, Vance's true goal had never been conquest or domination. It had been survival and the chance for a better future. A future where the galaxy would tremble not with fear, but with the promise of what could be achieved when all species worked together.